So here's Layout Manager. Kind of looks a little bit about like import export if you guys have been in there at all as well with the drop downs and such. What you can do for categories, you're going to choose what you're trying to look at, right? What is the thing that you're trying to change? So let's go ahead and maybe just take a look at tasks. So if I say work, my drop down then, I have a couple options: tasks, timesheet, and work orders. For some admin users, just to kind of heads up for things, timesheet, that is the enter resources. So I know you guys are not using that a ton currently with labor, material, and other and equipment. However, if you guys ever need to change that layout, timesheets is where you'll need to go. Go ahead and say tasks for now. View type. So we've talked about a couple different view types, right? We have list view, we have detail view, and then there's the Cartograph 1 view, right? So there's different options there. A list view is your actual column selectors, so you can set defaults for the column selectors. However, that's not going to stop a user from going in and changing their columns, right? They can certainly do that. The list view is strictly for your default settings. If a user goes in and then changes their columns, their user persistence is going to win, and they don't have the view anymore, right? Lookup view, that's the drop down. So if you guys are ever on a field and use the drop down, what shows up in the drop down, what fields actually show up. So if you guys want to see more, so for activities, when you pick an activity, if you want to see more like a description of what the activity does or whatever that may be, you could certainly add columns to that. The big one that's actually dealt with is the detail view. So detail view is actually what you guys truly see when you go in and you click on a task to actually do work on it. As you can see, you guys have about 4 custom views when it comes to tasks, and then you have the Cartograph default. So everything's going to have a Cartograph default, right? Because when the system first gets spun up, you guys want to make sure you have something to see, so all the defaults are there. So we have a couple here. So we have ARA, GEC, ITS, and structure, and then Cartograph default. Let's just click through a couple and you guys can kind of see the differences about them. So Cartograph default, if you guys just came out of the box and didn't do anything customizable, for tasks, this is what you would actually see. You would have a map at the very, very top. You would then have your location information. Your task setup would only include 4 fields. It wouldn't have your details or work orders or anything like that you guys added extra. You'd have your task details, your assignments, and then your logs underneath it. However, you guys have done some editing, so if we take a look at ITS tasks, we can see that the very top one is tracking, right? Current ITS responsibility. And then it actually has the child record setup here. Task setup is also different because recommendation, details, and work order have all been added there. Nothing too crazy in task details except maybe something like lane closure got added to it. Then you have assignments, your maps further down, so on and so forth. Now, how do we know who gets this view? That's where the whole roles came into play. If you look over on the top right, you will see something called role administration, and if you select that, you will see the list of roles that we just saw on the previous page. The ones with the check marks are the ones that actually see this layout, right? So if you're like, oh, hey, my partner's seeing something, but I'm not, you can always come in here and see what layout you're actually looking at. So this is actually going to tell you whose check mark is who actually is viewing this role. So you guys have multiple layouts here, so you guys are probably all across the board, depending on which one you're in. I'm going to go to Cartograph default real quick and show you guys how to modify this. So if you don't want to see a value, like I don't need to see units completed ever, right? That never needs to be part of my task layout. You can go ahead and click the X, the orange X here, and it actually gets it off the view. You don't need to actually have it visible. But if you want something like bridge number to be on there, you can click and drag the element and drop it over. You can drag it wherever you need it to go, right? You can pick where it needs to go, so on and so forth. So you can certainly modify these. You'll never be able to save over Cartograph default. Once again, any defaults in Cartograph, you have to do a duplicate, right? So save as and things like that. But you guys can certainly modify that. You can bring other grids on, other child record sets on if you want to, like the tracking child record set. I went from grids and just kind of dragged them over and dropped them in. And now we stuck in place. If you guys are changing things like Cartograph default, I can always reset. And now it's back to the way it was before because I didn't make any changes for saving. In turn, I think there was a discussion earlier about, where's the ITS number on, where was that at, or inspection number on one of the tasks, and I couldn't see it. This is why, is because you guys have multiple layouts for tasks, and each one is going to have some differences in it, whether that be a defect task cost estimate, structural setup. There's your inspection number that I didn't know was talking about, right? That's there that some other roles aren't going to see. So when I come into role administration, you can see the only people that actually see this is for this one, nobody. No role actually sees this guy. So it may be on a different one. But you can kind of click through and see how each layout's different and who actually is assigned to them. Another thing is, like I said, you can click and drag or take them off, so on and so forth. You can always add sections as well and move them around. So in add a section, if I click this, I could say test, and then if I scroll way down to the bottom, there's my test header. So he automatically gets put down at the bottom. I can certainly click and drag to move him elsewhere if I need to, if I want to do organizational things. Scroll down to the bottom here again. I can go ahead and edit him and change what he says. I can add a group header, which is these guys underneath him. Or I can just disregard the header in general. Some things you won't be able to change. Those are defaults, right? Like other sections and labor logs. Things that are system calculated for you, those things are going to be not editable, but you can certainly turn them on and off with these checkboxes, which it looks like you guys have done. Any questions concerning the detail view? Or how roles tie into Layout Manager in general? Yep, that's what we're going to go into next. So just instead of tasks, I did get a question about inspections. So I can go into assets here. I'm just going to leave without saving anything. You can get a list of all your assets. Just a heads up for, if you guys don't know, inspections are children of assets, not tasks, right? So an inspection belongs to an asset, does not belong to a task. Just one of those basic database structure things that does confuse a lot of people, because in the user interface you create an inspect task and then there's a start inspection button on the task. But just a heads up, an inspection belongs to the asset itself. So if I came to bridges and I hit the plus button, if you guys didn't see that, they all have plus buttons next to it, there is the inspections. So if you want to go ahead and edit a layout for an inspection, you come into assets, find the asset you want, and then you click on the inspections. Then you can actually do your detail view, and then you can see there's a bridge inspect and then a cartograph default. So bridge inspect is going to look a little different. You can see it does have the element level on there and has changed things around. So this is where you can actually edit, drag more fields on, and that type of thing, if you want to go ahead and change the way your inspections look. The one thing you cannot do is change the way condition categories look. I think that's been kind of said already. Condition categories is more of a system calculated thing. You can add notes to it and such. However, if I scroll down, you can see condition categories is just a white space. There's nothing in between it. Reason for being is you guys will see an asset condition manager. There's filters that need to be met, and system will actually populate those for you. So there's not just a set thing that you can see there. You can certainly add fields probably in it, but that's the extent. So other than that,
how much a lot of people have seen that. I mean, it's more of a way to dive into a little more before we get into the the asset manager or something like that.
Asset condition manager.
Yeah.
And what haven't they seen? Like just an inspection or?
No, I'm just saying like they've populated the condition categories.
Gotcha.
But I don't
Okay.
think they've really seen it like how the weights are.
Okay, I gotcha.
It's a good portion of it. I think people haven't seen it.
Okay. Other than that, yeah, this is kind of the layout for all of your inspections. Is there something particular you wanted to see?
I was just curious. This is a bridge inspection. Could you select the bridge? Can you have two layout?
You can, but a role can only see one, right? So you can have multiple, but a role can only see one. You get one specific layout per role. So if you belong to the ITS user role, just as an example, you can only see one bridge inspection layout. You can't have multiple layouts and switch between them.
trying to get to the element and routine again. We have two different bridge inspections,
Mhm.
and we have it rolled into one inspection or whatever like that. And we have ways to kind of distinguish it, but then the team only, fills out a portion of it, depending on what they're doing.
Right.
Seems to be a common gripe, I guess, on cartograph blogs or whatever like that. Multiple
Yeah,
inspections.
I know in Cartograph Ideas there's a huge thing with tasks as well, having to be able to change the layout based off of like an activity. So if it's a inspect activity versus a repair activity, the layout should be different because you're going to populate different fields and such. So that's another one. I know that one's a big talk and has a lot of hits on it.
So, this is just being that we'd like to find a way to better distinguish between the two different types of inspections, but it also gets back into the source of the thing. Is it should it really be two different inspections? Should it just be one inspection, or whatever else? But as of right now, it's just revolved around training the personnel. Is how we address it. But there's any other ways, that you think of to help us out?
I guess one question would be: are both inspections true cartograph inspections? So when I say true cartograph inspections, I mean like, do they actually have effect on the OCI value?
The element level does not have an effect on the OCI value.
Then maybe that's something you consider making a child record set instead. So inspection for that new inspection form that pops up and everything like that, what you really want to be able to do there is actually tell it, you're inspecting it to tell it what its OCI is. That's the true meaning of that inspection, right? Is being able to fill out the condition categories and saying, look, I know your estimated says you're at a 75, but I'm going through and marking things down. You're really at a 95. You're really calculating the lifespan. That's what the inspection's there to do. If you're just going to inspection, then you're hitting not inspected for everything, and then you're moving on. You could kind of consider that's not a true cartograph inspection, right? Because you're not affecting the OCI in any way. You're just saying go as you are. I just entered in new data.
Correct.
So that might be something maybe you want to consider potentially moving to a child record set, whether that be on the asset or the task or something along those lines, to where you can fill. I don't know what all you need to fill out at this time, but if it's just a bunch of fields that you kind of walk through and step through, maybe that's a task and you have a child record set, or you just have a child record set on the asset and you have like a date on it and say at this date I did this element, so on and so forth. That might be something you could look into.
We have it set up as a child record set for within the inspection. So what do you mean by a child record set?
You could make it on the asset itself. So you don't ever have to create a task. You could just go to that asset, create a new child record set of element, and then fill in all your details.
Yeah, so we have that. So we have that. That's where the child record set that basically says what the total quantities are, and then we have another thing that basically says, what are there's 4 different conditions, and we give a snapshot in time, and the percentage of the quantities are this, the percentage of the quantities are in category 1, percentage 2, 3, and 4. So these are all, they're still snapshot in time. So if we made a child record set of that, I think we can talk about it a little more offline.
Okay.
Else.
Yeah.
But maybe there is a way to do it, but as of right now, I guess I'm still not seeing that.
Okay.
And also the fact that with each inspection, you want to have 4 groups. So
Mhm.
you have it as if it's a task, then you can add 4.
Right.
In the asset level.
Then you would just have to add
In the
inspect
asset.
it on the asset level, yeah, instead of on the, yeah.
I think offline, show.
Okay.
And maybe it's something that you just make as a task and have a section on a task instead of having it in the inspection or something along those lines too. But
No,
we can talk about this later too. So.
We should definitely restructure it to be on the task pool, and then just crop out the majority of it and see it. And that might be a good solution. Well, we could be solving this problem or anything. We could be getting to, if we change it next year, where we have this all the team is just there and they're doing both at the same time. And it's like, oh, we're going to do a lot of effort just to now we're going to be undoing what we just did. So I don't know if that's really a real thing that we go into. I know that's something I've talked to some people about in the past, but I don't want to distract the whole team at this point in time, so let's move on.
So kind of just to show you the other two things that you haven't seen yet, I kind of explained it real quick, are the list view and the lookup view per se. So list view, looks like you guys just have cartograph default. Like I said, this would be if like a new user came in. These are the columns they would get when they opened up a task layer. The thing is with this is if the minute that person goes in and moves columns around like we've been doing or shutting columns on and off, their persistence takes over, right? So they don't want to sign out and sign back in and then their columns are all screwed up again. Back to the way that this view is. So columns are kind of iffy because everyone kind of wants their own personalized columns, right? They need certain columns, certain places, sorted certain ways. So this is like what they get by default if they're a brand new user, but the minute they go in and actually modify it to be what they want, then their persistence takes over. Lookup view. This is going to be in a drop-down. So if you ever have a task ID drop-down or activity library might be a good one. When you ever click on the activities library, what columns show up or requesters. This is the lookup view. So by default, if you ever have a task ID lookup and you use the drop down, these are going to be the things that show up inside of that lookup, and so on and so forth. So if you guys have department as a lookup, you can choose department plus a description or route plus description, whatever that may be. The lookup view is there for when you click the drop down, what actually shows up and what can you search on. Kind of. So like by default for lookup, all this stuff is going to show up for if you have an activity based on where you're at and everything like that versus other ones. That's pretty much sums up layout.